From the beautiful city of Los Angeles, California, we bring you the Gimme Three podcast.
Welcome back, cinephiles, cinema lovers, and movie appreciators to the Gimme Three podcast, a series for cinephiles. I'm your co-host, Bella Efstratis, and I'm joined, as always, by my brilliant co-host, Nicholas Ybarra, as well as our special guest, Gimme Three podcast producer and LADFF director, Sonja Mereu. Welcome back, everyone. How are you guys doing today?
I'm doing great. Glad to be here. Glad to be here 3 times. It's been really fun.
3 times in 1 month. I'm also doing great. You know, it's Sunday that we're recording this. It's a nice sunny day in Los Angeles.
That sounds amazing. I just got back from being outside in the cold of Salt Lake City, so.
Tomorrow morning, I'm leaving for the cold of Mammoth and Tahoe.
Oh, nice.
So, right there with you.
Yep.
Or part of the way there anyway, not quite as far.
Yeah. Well, it's time for the third and final round of our Favorites of 2024 series. And so far, we've had a pretty well-rounded selection, from underrated gems to some of the biggest films of the year. And we started with challengers, Love Lies Bleeding, and A Different Man, then dove into The Wild Robot, Kneecap, and Sing Sing. And today we're talking about 2, but what I think should have been 3 Best Picture nominees, if you ask me. More of that later. We're rounding out the series with 3 of the most talked about, debated, and celebrated movies of the year. But before we jump in and conclude the series, I know we kind of touched on this a little bit in our first episode of this, but I wanted to ask one last time if you guys can give me 3 official honorable mentions from 2024.
I can, for sure. And I don't even remember what I said on the first episode, so these might be different.
Oh, fun. Good.
I really thought there were a lot of really good movies last year. All right, so my 3 official honorable mentions are all ones I've actually talked about on the show at one point or another. The first one is The Apprentice, which is the film about young Donald J. Trump and his relationship with his mentor, Roy Cohn. It is an Oscar nominee for acting for both Jeremy Strong and Sebastian Stan. And yeah, I just think that, I think I've said this before, I know we don't want to think about Trump, but when I'm sitting there wondering, what could this man be thinking and why does he do the things he does? I actually thought that The Apprentice was very illuminating. In addition to just a good and funny movie. My second is Flip Side, which is a documentary that I talked with you about, Bella. Hard to describe quickly, but it's basically the story of, it's a documentary that the wonderful guy whose name I can't remember made about his many false starts at documentary projects and how they all kind of came together when he was making a documentary about his favorite childhood record store, Flipside, in New Jersey. And then my last one is Day of the Fight, which stars Michael Pitt as a boxer getting ready for his comeback match after being in prison for 10 years. And it follows him through the day of the fight, the day leading up to the fight, as he makes amends and tries to do right by all the people that he wronged. It's really beautiful. It's directed by Jack Huston.
Oh, wow. That sounds incredible.
Day of the Fight is actually one of my honorable mentions as well, funny enough.
Aww.
So there you go. Maybe we should have picked it for sure.
It was so hard for me to not pick it, but Love Lies Bleeding just won out.
Can't go wrong with that.
Second movie I would pick. The other 2 movies that I'm going to pick, and I might be forgetting something because you caught me with my pants down here, Bella. But
I'm so sorry.
The other 2 are both romantic comedies. Kind of new, fresh, and inventive romantic comedies. One of them is Hitman, which I believe I talked about in a bonus episode, directed by the great Richard Linklater and starring the very sexy Glenn Powell, one of the one of the it boys of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Crime thriller meets rom-com. It's full of surprises, and it is. I found myself, doing what a rom-com should. I really wanted these people to end up together, and then at one point, I really did say, "My God, they're not going to end up together." What a fool am I? How many rom-coms have I seen? I know they're going to end up together. Spoiler alert, but it got me. It definitely got me. And the other one stars our friend, Sonja and I's friend, Melissa Barrera, and it's called Your Monster. And it is about a girl who falls in love with a monster. It is a kind of like a modern take, but way more fun and fresh version of Beauty and the Beast, if you will. And I believe it's available to stream on Max right now, so check that out.
Oh, good. I've been wanting to watch that one, so that is good to know. Yeah, I'm going to have to choose. I'm going to mispronounce her last name probably, so apologies. But Helena Rain's Baby Girl. I was a Baby Girl fan. I know it was very polarizing, but that theater experience was so much fun, and Nicole Kidman rocks. So I enjoyed that. My second one would probably be, I think I may have mentioned this in the first episode, but Alex Garland's Civil War just really stuck with me. It's been I watched it when it first came out at the beginning of last year, so I'm looking forward to coming back to that one and seeing what the rewatch is like. And then third, I have to go with Andrea Arnold's Bird. That movie had such an impact on me as well, and I really haven't stopped thinking about it since. So definitely check those three out. We'd love to hear what you guys think of all these movies. And without further ado, let's do this thing. Let's kick it off with our final episode, Favorites of 2023 or 2024.
Gimme Three. Who cares what year it was?
Who knows what year it is anymore?
23, 24, 25, Here we go. Gimme Three of 2024. We wrap it up here, and we're starting with Nosferatu. Written and directed by the Eggman himself, Robert Eggers. It's a remake of the 1922 German expressionist silent film Nosferatu, a symphony of horror. Movie is also obviously based off of Dracula by Bram Stoker. This is all to say, of course, we've seen this story before. If you've seen any adaptation or any depiction of the Dracula story, you know the plot. So the question wouldn't be, what is the film about? The question would be, what does Robert Eggers do with this film, with this Dracula story that we are all so familiar with? So the film opens with Ellen, who's played by Lily Rose Depp. She's tossing and turning in the middle of the night. She's lonely, She's praying and pleading to some supernatural being to cure this loneliness of hers. Oh, and I wonder, is that all it takes, Apparently, because some freaky ass supernatural thing starts working her junk, and we see her getting off, and then bang, this vampiric hand starts strangling her, and we go, okay, she's a freak. And we see the title, Nosferatu, and we're like, okay, all right, different. So we jump in time several years, and Ellen is older now, and she's now married to this dweeb, Thomas Hutter, who's played by Nicholas Hoult. This was the year of sweaty Nicholas Hoult. 3 sweaty Nicholas Hoult movies. And since her love and courtship to this Thomas, she's stopped having visions, nightmares, what have you, about this vampiric being. She's, stopped having these premonitions of darkness. But when her husband has to leave town to go make a real estate deal in Transylvania, of all places, Ellen is like, no, don't do that. I have a very bad feeling about that place. It's called Transylvania, for fuck's sake. Bad shit's gonna happen. Stay here. Love me. Be with me. Damn work. And Thomas says, listen, women, I gotta make some bread. We gotta buy a house. We gotta do the things, So anyways, he goes, and lo and behold, bad shit starts to happen. Not only to old Thomas, but to Ellen as well. So Thomas encounters the old man he's selling this property to, Count Orlok, a disgusting, horrifying being who does not seem of this world. That's played by Bill Skarsgård. This is our Nosferatu, in case you haven't guessed. And his voice is all deep and horrific and like really horrifying, and it's recognizable to us, the audience, as the scary thing that was getting old Ellen off in the first scene. So Orlok, he soon realizes that Thomas is married to our girl Ellen. And once he does, he makes it his mission to get back to Ellen. He starts communicating with her again. And in a way, he starts controlling her, possessing her. And back home, Ellen is having these full-on possession episodes, and she's freaking out, and she's seizing up, and all the darkness is returning her. And everybody's like, put her in a goddamn corset, tie her up, and give her some drugs. Orlok and Thomas, they both race home to win over or save Ellen, however, you want to interpret it. But with him, Orlok brings this deadly plague, as well as a dilemma for Ellen. He says, I will give you 3 nights to decide. You're going to Gimme Three. He gives her 3. Gives her 3 nights to decide. You're going to be with me, and each night you choose not to be with me, I'm going to kill somebody you love. And the last one I'm going to kill is your dweeb of a husband. Can Ellen shake this darkness that possesses her heart? Can love find its place in a world of plague-ridden death and dread? And will we see some freaky, weird vampire dick? Find out in the next installment of Nosferatu, directed by Robert Eggman Eggers.
I love it.
What are your thoughts on Nosferatu?
I'm speechless.
Yeah, me too. That was such a beautiful introduction. I'll preface it by saying I am a huge fan of Robert Eggers. He's probably one of my favorite directors of all time. And I think he's one of the greatest modern filmmakers right now. I am also a huge fan of the 1922 Nosferatu. I remember watching that for the first time in a film class in college, and we got to watch it in like the big theater on campus. And a horror movie, it hits different in a theater setting. It's scarier in a theater setting, and I really wasn't expecting to be so disturbed and scared of this 103-year-old movie. God, it got me. I mean, I was just enthralled with this film. It's so unsettling. It's so eerie. And so a few years later, when I heard that Robert Eggers was going to take a stab at it, I was just like, perfect. Yeah, he's the guy to do this for sure. Wholehearted faith. And so, yeah, I probably had too high of expectations for this film, but I'm really happy to say that the film exceeded all of them. I was absolutely blown away by this. If you didn't pick it, I was going to. This was probably, to be honest, my favorite movie of last year.
Wow.
Bold statement,
yeah.
But it just was so magnificent. I mean, I was in it. I felt like I lived in it, and I almost wanted to escape because it's so disturbing and twisted and evil. And I have to say, I was sleeping on Lily Rose Depp as well. I had seen her in like one other thing before this and was like, oh yeah, she can't act. That was painful. And then I watched this and I was like, oh, okay, I see what's going on here. Like, she can do it. She can do it. And I think she killed it in this.
Good directing makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, I think this movie helped me learn that.
Direction, these directors, they play a key part in the
shocker. Who knew?
Well, also the way they like filmed her face and seeing it. I think we saw it twice. We saw it once on like the IMAX at the Chinese theater and then again at the Bev. Yeah, just seeing the way they film her face, and it's so huge on the screen. And obviously she's got incredible bone structure and skin. she's some good looking parents. So yeah, it's kind of like it made her, it was a star making performance.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's funny. I have to say, I really, really liked the movie, but as someone who doesn't watch horror movies, I was like worried that I was going to be scared. And apparently when we were watching it the first time, Nick kept looking over to like make sure that I was okay. I wasn't remotely disturbed or scared by the film, which I don't know what that says about me.
You're a freak.
Nothing good. No.
But I have a thing with vampires. Like they're the one horror creature that doesn't really scare me for some reason. But yeah, so I'm curious, what made you think it was so disturbing?
I think for me, that there were a few jump scares that definitely got me. I think I just wasn't, I don't know. I guess I had heard so much about, oh, this is the scariest movie of the year. And I was like, that can't be true. That's just ridiculous. And so I went into it being like, oh, this is just going to be a gothic tale, if you will. And so that opening scene alone, which is one of my new favorite opening scenes of all time, I remember just looking over at my brother and we were like, oh, fuck, here we go. This is going to be a journey. It's so weird to say, but I feel like even the sexual undertones just coursing throughout all of it is just like another level of discomfort. And it just made me feel, it's like an uneasiness, if that makes sense. You're kind of just on the edge of your seat. And I never, even though like I had seen the original, I think this is a very beautiful tribute to the original. It still explores the world and the characters in a way that is really unexpected. So for me, I was like, I have no idea what's about to happen next, even though I know the traditional plot line, I guess.
Dread would be the word that I would use to describe the feeling that is permeating throughout this movie from the opening frame until after the credits roll. It sticks with you, this sense of dread, and it does a good job, in my opinion, of conveying a sense of dread that maybe is permeating throughout the country right now. And much of the world, this darkness, that's what this movie's about. That's what Nosferatu symbols. He even says it himself. He's like, I am, this darkness. And what it does that is interesting, an interesting shift from the 1922 version. In the 1922 version, the Ellen character is kind of like, she reveals herself as a main character like later, like well after the halfway point of the movie. This movie, she is the main character, the main focus. And in doing that, exploring that character, you get to explore some interesting themes like repression. This woman who's getting repressed for, having some outside the box thoughts, for seeing and feeling some darkness and wanting to explore these, for being very emotional. She's getting repressed. And what happens, my friends, when somebody is repressed constantly? What happens when somebody is forced to repress their feelings or repress who they really are? You get alienation. You get isolation. You get alienation and isolation. Those people become more vulnerable to manipulation. They may follow somebody or something very dark or very evil, even if they are a vampire who is sucking the life out of you for their own benefit. Does any of this sound familiar to you? In an interview that Robert Eggers was doing, he said, he was asked, Eggman, why are you so drawn to this darkness? Your movies are so dark. And maybe this answer explains why Ellen, his character, is drawn to the darkness as well. Robert Eggers actually quoted John Huston, who was asked the same question about, 40, 50 years earlier. And he said, the dark pearl glistens. There's just something shiny and magnetic about that darkness that just makes you want to go, I gotta see what's in there.
I like it. Yeah. And that's something you feel throughout this whole movie, even in the visual aesthetic. I mean, like you said, it's filled with dread. It's so gloomy. I love the dark and blue color palette throughout the whole thing. Yeah, you're just consumed by it. But at the same time, like you feel the dread, but at the same time, you're enamored with everything that you're seeing. It's so, so beautiful. That shot specifically of Thomas, Nicholas Holt's character, walking through the forest, and it's so dark except just a little bit of light is like creeping through the opening of the trees at the top, and you can see snow falling, and you're like, yeah, if I was in his position right now, I would be so upset. Like, I don't want to be cold walking through a dark forest at night to my doom. But when you're watching it in a cozy theater, you're like, this is the most beautiful setting I've ever seen.
Right.
Yeah. I really like the whole section where he's traveling to the Count. Nick and I talked about how maybe that actually like kind of might slow down the pacing of the film, but which I don't disagree with. But it was a part of the story that I had never seen in other iterations. I've never seen, I should say, I've only seen Bram Stoker's Dracula. I've never seen the original Nosferatu. So I don't know if that part where he goes into like the town is in the original. But yeah, I liked like filling out the world more, and yeah, it was beautiful. Yeah. And when the coach comes to pick him up and it's like driverless and the like door just opens, you're like, yes, you're like, yeah, that's not good. Like nothing good is going to happen here. Although Nick, you said that you thought that the Count realizes that he's the husband when he's already at the castle doing the transaction. I read it as he was sent because he's her husband. Because his boss is I don't know what the character's name is in this, but Renfield, right? Like the assistant.
Yes.
So I felt like it was all part of the Count's grand plan.
Right. It was. I was just for the sake of my plot introduction.
Well, we're calling you out. So.
I dumbed it down.
I have a thought or question, because in both this film with Nicholas Hoult and in Bram Stoker's Dracula by Coppola, which is more or less the same story in a lot of ways, the husband is so unlikable and kind of he's not going to do it for her. And, she's trying to conform, or she's doing what's right. So doesn't that kind of make you think that the vampire character signifies something positive or something that she needs?
I like that idea a lot. Yeah. I think I was not mad about the weird, freaky romance going on between Ellen and Nosferatu. I was kind of here for it. Maybe I'm just a freak as well.
I mean, he's certainly not attractive, and he's not
right, not in that context.
He's not doing good things, right? Bringing plague, murdering everyone on a boat, killing their friends. But it's something that kind of whatever. It's like some sexual liberation or emotional, intellectual liberation from like this restrictive Victorian setting. Like, it seems like he's not all bad.
Yeah. 'Cause even when she's healthy, you can tell how repressed she is, and that's not good.
Well, even the husband, Nicholas Hoult, is continuing to repress her. She's like she's telling him about this dream that she had, or this nightmare about them getting married, and then she realizes that she's marrying the manifestation of death, and all their friends are dead. And he basically is like, shut up, don't ever say that out loud. People are going to think you're crazy. Like, so it's already happening. What was happening to her with her father is already happening to her with her husband.
Right.
And then don't they have like pretty weak sex right after that?
Yeah, they do, I think. Yeah.
If I'm remembering that scene.
Okay. Interesting.
Missionary again. After we saw it the first time, I was like thinking about it and I was like, was that movie black and white?
Yeah.
And Nick was like, no. I was like, why am I remembering it in black and white?
It has black and white aura.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think because
really
it feels so classic. Yeah.
I'm curious. So what iterations have we all seen of this story? Because I know isn't there like a Werner Herzog Nosferatu as well, which I need to see. For me, I'd seen the original Nosferatu and Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yeah, I've seen Bram Stoker's Dracula many, many, many times. It's one of my guilty pleasures, I guess. And then The Shadow of the Vampire I saw when it came out, like I barely remember it, but that's like the one about the making of Nosferatu.
Oh, cool.
Which also has Willem Dafoe in it.
Yeah, he plays Nosferatu.
Yeah. Amazing. The actor. Oh, I have to see that. Oh my God.
It's really fun. It's got, who else is in it?
John
Malkovich plays the F.W. Murnau. It's really a blast. So yeah, I've seen that, Shadow of the Vampire, Bram Stoker's Dracula, the original Dracula, the like 1930s Universal, and then shot basically simultaneously the Spanish version of Dracula, which they were using the same sets, I believe. Like they were shooting the American version of Dracula, and then it'd be like, bah, bah, quitting time, chief. Americans go home. Spanish crew comes in, use the same sets. Then they're making like essentially their own version of this. The Spanish version, a little bit better than the American version, if I do say so myself. And then I've seen Nosferatu. So I've seen a decent amount, but there are even more versions available. I haven't seen Werner Herzog's. There's another version, I think, with Christopher Lee that came out in the 70s that I have not seen. That's a Dracula movie.
Yes. So a well-tread story.
Yes.
For sure.
Yeah, certainly.
I've also seen Twilight. Does that count?
Definitely. It's funny because Twilight is like the only vampire lore that I can think of that doesn't totally follow vampire, or the only vampire story that doesn't totally faithfully follow OG vampire lore.
Yeah, they definitely have their own ideas. I mean, the fact that they can go out in daylight, I guess, is a huge thing.
Because even like Vampire Diaries, if we have any Vampire Diaries fans, that one has a lot of Bram Stoker in it as well. Fucking Twilight, man. They just went and did their own thing, I guess. But we're not talking about that.
No, we're not.
Sorry. But Robert Pattinson was also in The Lighthouse. It all comes full circle.
Could do like a 6 degrees. Yeah.
Those movies stink.
Yeah. Guilty pleasures for me.
Bella and I will do the Twilight Gimme Three.
You could bring my mom on for those too, because she loves that Twilight stuff.
Oh, that would be awesome.
I do have what I have here. I got Gimme 3 letterboxed reviews for Nosferatu.
Oh, let's go.
www.letterboxd.com. 1 star. 2 stars. 3 stars. 4 stars. 5 stars.
Okay, here we go. Gimme 3 letterboxed reviews. Ada, or Ada, or Ada, gives the film 4 stars, and she writes, "Never show an ugly man attention. They'll never leave you alone." Haley also gives the film 4 stars, and she writes, "Sure, the plague is cruel. But do you know what's far more cruel? Being forced to sleep in a corset."
Fair enough.
And then last but not least, Mac, they write, "So it's okay to sing along during Wicked, but if I start biting people during Nosferatu, I'm in the wrong." Interesting.
Yeah, what the hell?
Give me 3 letterbox reviews for Nosferatu. There you go.
I just wanted to call out, I mean, I think the whole cast really is exceptional, including Nicholas Hoult, even though I said, he's not sexy and he's a crappy, boring husband, but he plays it well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's not anything like that in real life. But my personal favorite was Aaron Taylor Johnson, because I just think he's underrated as an actor in general, but he was so funny in this. Like, he was, to me, more than Willem Dafoe, the comic relief of the film.
Yeah, I could totally see that.
And they gave him a good arc. Like, he had a lot to do.
Yeah, he did. He had one of the more interesting arcs in the movie.
I want to shout out as well Simon McBurney, who plays Ernok, Nosferatu's like batshit crazy ex-familiar or something like that. He was now I'm saying it. He was one of the reasons this movie was so scary to me. I thought he was scarier than Nosferatu, because it's like, in a way, Nosferatu is a monster, but this guy is human and he's acting like a monster. And there's something so much more unsettling by that. There's such a twisted scene where we've got this really intense close-up on him and he's holding this pigeon, and you know that like some heinous shit is about to happen. You're preparing yourself for it, but you kind of expect it to happen off camera or in a different way, and then this man just bites and rips the head off the pigeon right in front of you, and it takes up like the entire frame too. So it's just, okay, we're doing this now. Like, and yeah, his performance was unreal to watch.
Yeah, he was horrifying. Yeah. And then when he bites when he bites the head, you see, like the vein like spurts out this blood. It's just like, oh jeez.
Oh, it's so disturbing. But I love it.
Wasn't quite as cool as when Ozzy Osbourne did it on stage, but close second.
Same vein.
Literally. Well, I'll tell you this. It appears that Nosferatu is actually still playing in select theaters. So if you see it playing in a theater near you, it's definitely playing at a few in the great city of Los Angeles. So I would recommend checking it out on the big screen, because otherwise you have to pay, whatever it is, $20 to watch it at home. You might as well see it the way that the good Lord intended. On the big screen with the big sound and seeing that big old pigeon getting his head ripped off. Live and in living color, not black and white.
Just a reminder.
Yeah, just a reminder. Nosferatu.
Next up, we've got my pick, my third and final pick. I chose Sean Baker's newest joint, starring Mikey Madison in Anora. Mikey plays Annie, a 24-year-old woman working as a stripper in Brooklyn. And one random night at the club, Annie is recruited to a table of Russians to speak a little bit of Russian. She's the only one in the club. And this is when she meets Vanya, the young and reckless son of a wealthy Russian oligarch. Vanya invites Annie to spend the weekend with him, where she steps into a world of obscene wealth and unfathomable luxury. And on top of being paid $15,000 for the week, Vanya whisks her away to Vegas with all of his friends for a little party. And just as their luxurious whirlwind is coming to an end, Vanya suggests that they get married. One perk is he'll get his green card, and two, apparently he's fallen madly in love with her in a week. Skeptical, of course, but, caught up in the romance and the money, Annie accepts. And so the couple elopes in Vegas, but after returning home, instead of a lovely honeymoon, the couple's fairy tale is interrupted by Vanya's Armenian godfather, Toros, and his henchmen, Garnik and Igor, sent by Vanya's parents to annul this surprise marriage that they've just discovered. And like a little bitch boy, Vanya simply takes off and disappears into the city, leaving Annie to defend herself, her new life, and their love. And after a ridiculous struggle, she finally agrees to work with them to look for Vanya. So yeah, that's just a little intro to Sean Baker's new film. What did you guys think of this one?
Well, there's one scene early that made me really relate to Annie, because it brought me back. It brought me back to a time in my life when I was a stripper. No. It brought me back to right before I met Sonja, actually. I was working on a movie in the great New York City, and I was working night shoots. And there's this shot of Annie after she's like working her shift as a stripper. And it shows her just traveling home, and she's on the subway and she's walking through the New York streets, and she's like alone, and she's devoid of the life and energy that we just saw her having, maybe a shell of herself, or maybe this is her real self and the other part of her is the shell. Who's to say? Seeing these shots reminded me of being in New York for the first time, and I was working there for about a month, and I was working nights and working on this movie that was like freezing cold. And so I was going to bed when everybody was getting up, and I knew nobody. And my weekends, I had like a weird clock going on. And again, I knew nobody. So basically I was alone. I was really, really alone. It made me not like the city the first time I went there. It has now since become like perhaps my favorite city in the country, because I've traveled there with my lovely wife so many times, who is from the great city of New York City. But anyways, it made me kind of get it. It was my way in to this story of a person who is alone in this big city and who wants something bigger. I wish her want was a little bit more clearly defined by the writer. But my guess, my interpretation, and I don't know if it's accurate, is the American dream, And I only say that because the color palette that we see throughout the movie is lots of reds, whites, and blues. In the club, there are always red, white, and blue lights. In the production design, there's a lot of red, white, and blue. So the American dream, or the tease of the American dream, seems to be very present in this movie. And of course, doesn't always go great when you're trying to pursue the American dream.
Although I will note, Nick, that when you were going through that lonely period in New York, you were staying in Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. And in this movie, she is also staying in Brooklyn. Mm. If either one was set in Manhattan, if you were staying in Manhattan, you would not have felt so lonely, because Manhattan is better than Brooklyn. Right. No matter what anyone says. Come at me.
The hipsters are going to have a fucking field day with us right now.
Mm-hmm. People live in Brooklyn because they can afford it more.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. I think Brooklyn is great. But I do think it doesn't have the hustle, bustle nature of New York. Like, Brooklyn is not the city that doesn't sleep. It's Manhattan. It's just a different vibe.
Fair.
But I'm mostly kidding. I mean, I think the absolute strongest part of this film is, one, the sense of place. Like, I do think that establishing America as the way that someone who's not wealthy and from America experiences it, and America the way that a wealthy person from another country experiences it, like showing the difference, is very well done. Vegas is kind of like the epitome of that. But, the ultimate strength of this film is in the casting, and the acting 100%. And the directing. Like, the performances are kind of everything for this movie. Because, like, as Nick said, I did not feel like I especially knew Annie in like a deep way because of the performance and probably the depth that Mikey Madison brought to the character internally. You're like, she's fascinating. I mean, this movie's probably going to win Best Picture. She could even win Best Actress.
So. Wow. Yeah.
I mean, that wouldn't be my vote, but
yeah,
it seems to be. Nick told me that that's going to win, and he's usually right.
Interesting.
I vote with my heart, or I believe with my heart. He believes with his mind.
I like what you said there, though, because I didn't totally think about that. And now that you're saying it, like, it would have been really nice to have her character fleshed out a bit more before jumping into this whole chaotic Cinderella story, if you will, which a lot of people are calling it. But like you said, I think Mikey Madison's performance is so special because she does so much with so little, to be honest, in a way that you kind of get to make up whatever you want about her character based off of just really little details. And I think that can make it a really fun and almost personalized viewing experience for viewers to just, pick at things that she does that you relate to, like little mannerisms or the way she talks, the lingo she uses. It just felt so natural and true to this character. But it definitely would have been interesting to see a bit more of who she truly is. Like, I really loved the moments of her at home because it felt like, oh, okay, we're getting to see like what her world is actually like outside of work. But those were very brief, kind of just hints at what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. This film it's so weird, to be honest. It's a really bizarre movie because it feels so goofy and fantastical almost. And then it'll just switch completely and go right back to being fully grounded in reality and in a really unexpected way and really unexpected timing as well. And at first I kind of hated that. I was like, this is too weird. But then I just couldn't stop thinking about it. And I just thought more and more about it. And I was like, it's kind of fun that made me feel such an intense feeling. I worded that poorly, but it's hard to articulate the takeaway of this film.
Oh, it has like almost slapsticky hijinks. Aspects. Like
totally.
One of my favorite scenes in the movie is when Vanya's father calls the Armenian godfather or whatever his exact job title is.
Right.
And it's like, you have to go deal with this. And he's like at his kid's christening. And that scene told such a complete story about the culture, about the person, everything. Like, I actually felt like I learned more about that guy than I maybe learned about Anora through the whole movie,
honestly.
in a way. Like, it was just but it was also like, it was such a funny scene. And I was like, yeah, I believe this would totally happen in real life.
100%. Yes.
And that totally plays into my theory about it being, a movie about the American dream. You got this guy, Igor, who is, I mean, that is the definition of working for the man. He has to leave his goddamn kid's christening to clean up the messes of his rich-ass boss's son.
Man-child.
Treated with no respect, much like Annie's treated with no respect. And they just are fucking grinding and grinding and grinding for peanuts.
Right. And it kind of makes you think, or the film implies that guy's more of a father figure to Vanya than his real father.
Right.
He treats him with more respect.
I mean, yeah, we see when Vanya is around his parents, he is a different person. He is like, he's a shell. Mm-hmm. He's not even like there. It's hard because I don't know that I felt bad for him because he's just such a piece of shit. But there is just like a little tiny twinge of the heart to think like, oh man, it's growing up with no love in your house like that, which you can clearly see in those moments, is pretty heartbreaking.
I think the guy who played Vanya has not gotten the amount of attention that he should for playing that role, because I think he did it so well that he's like an unknown here in the United States, that you're just like, that's how he is. And I'm like, I assume he's probably not. I hope he's not really like that. But he's like 100%. Like, I believe that this kid is real.
Mm-hmm. So authentic. Yeah.
Before I forget, I wanted to point out that the Armenian Godfather actor has been in, I think, all of Sean Baker's movies.
Oh, really?
He played a really small role in Florida Project as like the owner of the hotel, who was Willem Dafoe's boss.
Oh.
But he's like one of the main characters of Tangerine. He's the cab driver.
Way.
And then I don't know who he plays in Red Rocket, but I think he's been in all of the films. And he actually, Sean Baker said that they were developing this story together for a long time. And I think that was actually going to be the main character of the film. And then it evolved to be Annie or Anora's story.
Oh, wow.
Perhaps that's why that introduction of that character feels so lived in and well developed, because they probably had that scene in their head from the inception of this movie. It feels so, it's so tight and well done.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's really interesting. I wonder what that version would have been like.
He's my favorite character in the movie.
Me too.
I loved him. I love him in all of Baker's movies, but he is just so entertaining for me to watch. And although it didn't really help develop Annie in any way, his involvement, which I think is not a discredit to him, but a discredit to the script. But I just as far as just enjoying watching scene after scene, when he was in it, I was like, give me more of this guy. This is funny. You know?
Yes. I remember walking out of that theater being like, he's going to get a nomination, because I was so impressed with, I was just in it with that guy. He was the best part, honestly.
So for any of, I guess this is the PSA moment of the podcast, is it not? For all of our listeners who may be single, heterosexual women, if you watch Nosferatu, and if you watch Anora, the lesson always in life: beware of the bitch boy.
Yeah, fair enough. Pretty similar movies.
Beware of the bitch boy.
That is hilarious.
That might also be the lesson of Wild Robot. No, I'm just
yeah, fair enough.
Going back to last
week.
That
in there.
We could probably find it in everything.
Oh, man.
All right. And now for my third and final pick, I have selected Nickel Boys, which is based on a book by Colson Whitehead. It's directed by RaMell Ross, who also wrote the screenplay with Jocelyn Barnes. It stars Brandon Wilson as Turner, Ethan Heresy as Elwood, Anjanou Ellis-Taylor as Hattie, Elwood's grandmother. This movie happens to be nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay and Best Picture. So congratulations to RaMell Ross and Jocelyn Barnes. Kind of amazing. This is his first narrative feature film.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. And it's quite an ambitious film. So Nickel Boys tells the story of two African-American teenagers in the 1960s who were sent to an abusive reform school in Florida called Nickel Academy. We never learn why Turner ended up in there, but we know that he's originally from Houston and has no family to speak of. For the other young man, Elwood, was actually a dedicated student at all-black high school in Tallahassee, and he was on his way to go to, I think, an HBCU. And so the future is bright for him until he unknowingly gets into a stolen car when he's hitchhiking to college and is arrested and sent to Nickel Academy. After enduring violent abuse from the staff and witnessing the disappearance of some other boys, Elwood decides to document the abuse and tell the authorities in the hopes of shutting down Nickel Academy forever. The film and book are both inspired by true stories from a real place called the Dozier School for Boys that was in Florida, which was open till 2011.
Wow.
Oh my God.
Yes. Now closed, thankfully, and became notorious for its abusive treatment of students. I guess the other really special technical achievement is that the film is filmed in first person, pretty much exclusively, not necessarily always the same person's perspective. It alternates between Elwood's and Taylor, or between Elwood's and Turner's. But the actors were actually wearing like rigs. So it's not like a first person shooter. It doesn't look like awkward. It's absolutely beautiful cinematography. But yeah, it's a interesting and like initially jarring, but ultimately profound way to tell the story. Yeah, and I just loved this movie.
Yeah, I knew nothing going into this film, so was completely unprepared for this movie. I was so impressed that it committed to the first person POV perspective for the entirety of the film. That was incredible. And then second, the disjointed timeline was very unexpected, perfectly executed, in my opinion. This is such a remarkable film, such a special film. I'm really, really happy you picked it. And I'm really happy we're talking about it because I think more people need to see it.
We'll talk about the powerful characters and all that kind of stuff, but just to continue on the first person perspective thing, since it is such like a talking point about the film and a notable it's notable execution, but the approach has been done before. Like there's been movies that have been shot from first person before, but I think this movie was never before have I seen it done with such like an emotional payoff. The commitment to it, and when they choose to switch, and when and how they use it. It's not just, for lack of a better word, a gimmick. It is, in my opinion, the like perfect way to tell this story. Ross, the filmmaker, who's a Peabody Award winner, for God's sakes. I mean, this guy's already, this guy is off to an insane career. But he talks about how a lot of films, as we are like getting to know our characters or understanding our characters, developing the characters, in most movies, we learn about them through observation. Like we see them, we are looking at them. This film puts us in the characters' shoes. We see what they see, we hear what they hear. And when we do observe them, it's through the eyes of the other main character. So it's a really beautiful and brilliant approach. And it takes a lot of planning. I'm going to mention, actually, you guys can talk for a little bit because I got to look up this person's name because I have to give the unsung hero of this picture their due.
I'm so curious who the unsung hero is.
I know. Placing us in the shoes of these main characters through a first person perspective is also so unique in this film, for lack of a better word, because we've seen so many movies depicting this era and racism in this era, but to put yourself in the shoes of this character who is a Black kid and teenager, it really takes it to another level when you're watching it. And it felt like just an entirely different experience watching it in this way. And, like you said, Nick, we see this character through the eyes of others, but we also see him looking at himself in reflections, which I think is very...
Those are some of the best parts.
Yeah, I mean, that the first time we see him is this unforgettable shot that I truly will, like, I had like an audible reaction watching it, and he's watching his grandmother ironing, and you can see his reflection in the iron. And I genuinely cannot figure out how they achieved this shot without getting the camera in it, to be honest. I don't have the technological background and knowledge for this, so maybe you can speak to this more, Nick or Sonja. But that shot was so masterful and beautiful, and I love that it was the first time we see the character.
Well, and another like amazing reflection shot, which is actually also the poster or the image they're using and like all the key art for the film, is there like one time when they're like out in the real world together and they're alone and they're like looking up at this like mirrored ceiling, and we realize it's the only time you ever see the two together.
Yes.
Which is really beautiful. But I also think the choice to show it in like the first person, a small way of bringing the boys back to life, who were killed, who don't get to tell their own stories.
Yeah.
The unsung hero of this movie who should get, this is why, again, You all know my opinions about the Academy Awards, but this person should get an Academy Award. Callie Riley. She is the focus puller for this film.
Mm.
So for our listeners who don't know, the camera has to be in focus anytime unless you don't want it to be in focus for a creative purpose. But whenever a camera is pointed at something, there is a camera person, a assistant camera person who is pulling focus to make sure that the image is sharp where it needs to be sharp, and that draws your eyes to what it needs to be drawn to. And as I'm watching this movie, the cinematography and the operation of the camera, sometimes you're looking at the person you're talking to, but oftentimes, because of what's so brilliant about their approach, is oftentimes the characters are looking down, because sometimes we look down when we're uncomfortable or when we're, feeling vulnerable or stuff like that. And to shift that focus to where it always feels smooth and never feels like a camera, and it feels like a perspective. There was a couple shots where we're walking through a space and they do choose to rack focus. But most of the time when we go from looking at a person to like looking down at, say, our food or our shoes, or looking up at a ceiling, or just, eyes darting away, it does not feel like a camera move, which it is. It feels like somebody's vision. And
yes,
I just want to give this person their flowers. Callie Riley. I mean, God bless you, sister. You did an amazing work on this picture.
Thank you for bringing that up, because it's so flawless. Once you kind of get into the groove of the perspective, you just feel like you're looking,
Yeah,
exactly.
You're not thinking about, there's very few times in the movie that I was like, oh, that must have been hard to film. Like there's a scene where the grandma where Hattie is hugging Turner, and they have to get close and keep her shoulder in frame. I was like, oh, what is this rig I'm imagining is quite large and cumbersome, and how are they getting near each other?
yeah.
But very few times in the film did I have that thought.
Yeah.
Which is so impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also loved the way that the decision to shoot POV or first person worked so well with memory and childhood. That was a big thing for me in this film. There's in the first part of the film, we see a lot of Elwood's childhood. And in those moments, there's such a warmth to the images on screen. And there's also kind of a blurriness on the edges that kind of goes away throughout the film. And I think in the beginning, it's so perfectly used there because you can feel that this is a memory. He remembers some little things so vividly, but you can see that it's starting to fade as he gets older.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me, that is so beautiful. That shot of him lying under the Christmas tree, looking up at his grandmother hanging ornaments. I was like, I feel like I've had that experience and that image in my own memories before. It's little tiny things like that make it feel so relatable and so real and just so authentic. It's incredible.
And the acting is really impressive also. Brandon Wilson, Ethan Harris, is that how you say his name?
Harisi?
Ethan Harisi, Brandon Wilson, they both just delivered some really incredible performances through all of this technical stuff. And a lot of times they're delivering this performance stuff while wearing a camera rig. So it's even more impressive.
Well, and they've all talked about how hard it is to break the rule that you're taught of not looking into the camera when you're, acting. You're having thinking about Anjanou Ellis Taylor, Hattie. She has two extremely emotionally intense scenes. And she's, well, I guess probably more than 2, but there's 2 that I'm thinking of specifically at the school. And she's just looking straight down the camera.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that must feel like exposed in like a different way as an actor. I'm really like the hugest fan of RaMell Ross. He seems so brilliant and so sensitive. And it like comes through in all of his work. I've seen 2 things he's done in both of his works that he's done.
Seen it all.
He's a visual artist, and he has got a lot going on, I think. But we saw Hale County this evening when that came out. It's a very similar feeling to like the way your body feels when you're watching it is similar to Nickel Boys. Immersed, but you're floating. You feel happy, but so sad at the same time.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's quite a feat.
Yeah, he's a genuine artist.
Yeah,
this
very
RaMell
much
Ross.
An intense visual language in this film. You know, even pulling in those clips of like the Apollo mission. There's a lot of footage from that. And for me, I think there's so many ways to interpret all of the stuff happening in this film, which also makes it a really interesting film to talk about with people. For me, the space technology advancement motif throughout it, if you will, reminded me a lot of something that I've been thinking about a lot in just terms of the state of America right now. For my generation, you know, it feels very jarring and like we're going back in time a bit. And I think we're just like, oh, you know, we're talking about ChatGPT and immigration and all these crazy things going backwards. And in this, I thought, you know, it's like we're talking about the Apollo mission and slavery in the same era. And that is just like so but like that's a mind fuck, to be honest. And I thought that was just really, really fascinating to have it keep coming back throughout the entire film. And it's like reminding you that the world evolves, but there is evil taking place all over the world all the time.
Massive technological inventions. We can go to space, but we can't give each other equal rights and respect.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up because I did not fully like wrap my head around why that was in there. So I feel enlightened now.
I'm happy to hear that. Well, and I feel like that's just like one tiny little motif among so many others. Like you mentioned, Sidney Poitier comes up a lot as well. So there's there's so much to discuss.
Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah.
And I assume none of us have read the book.
I have not.
So,
but
don't know.
I read The Underground Railroad, which is the book by Colson Whitehead that came out before Nickel Boys, which was outstanding. But I have not yet read Nickel Boys, but I definitely will pick it up.
Yeah. Was that also the one made into a series by Barry Jenkins?
It is indeed the book from which Barry Jenkins' series is adapted from.
I have a question. What did you guys think of the alligator in this, or the crocodile? I don't know the difference. Exposing myself here.
I was going to ask the same thing. It's probably an alligator, and here's why I'm saying that, because I just went to the Everglades and I learned that alligators are in freshwater. Crocodiles prefer like brackish water, so like where the ocean meets the freshwater.
Okay.
So since it was like in a pool and stuff, I'm going to guess that it was an alligator. My science knowledge. That trip to Florida was worth it, Nick.
I love it.
I'm sure that's what he wanted. I'm sure that's what he wanted the audience to think about when he put that in the movie.
Is that an alligator or a crocodile? That's what matters most.
I actually was going to ask you guys that. I don't know. I liked it.
Yeah. The first time we see it, I kind of I thought it was real. I was like, oh, okay, maybe that's just what happens here.
It's a Florida thing.
It does
Yeah,
happen.
I was like,
They're walking down the street.
It's just a thing. But the second time we see this alligator in Nickel, and it's the first time is right after he doesn't see, but I think he hears someone being abused and arrested by the police, and the alligator shows up. The second time is, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe is in the school. He walks into the classroom and Spencer, the evil head teacher there, I guess, is lecturing a new class. And I believe it's right after he has been subjected to horrific abuse for the first time at the school. And so that was when I was like, oh, okay, maybe this is more of a symbol of this feeling of constant threat, which he's felt walking out and about in the city as an African American, and now he feels it in the presence of his abuser, Mr. Spencer. So yeah, I kind of just thought it was a symbol of that feeling of constant threat, but I think it could be interpreted in many ways as well.
Bella, you learned nothing from Malcolm X. You learned absolutely nothing.
Oh no!
What do we
That's
know?
not what I want to hear.
What do we know about the white man?
The devil.
The goddamn right, the devil. They are they are predators.
Right.
They are predators. Alligators are predators.
Predators.
Why is the alligator in the pool then? Is it because it's that guy's house?
Oh yeah, that's right. Then we see it a third time.
It just is letting you know predators be near. Don't trust that white woman.
Yeah, that white woman had me so, like, I hated those scenes with her. She made me so uncomfortable. It just felt weird. And so, yeah, I guess that makes sense then.
Yeah, she's like the lady in Zone of Interest.
Oh, yes.
Like just living right next door.
Yeah,
like,
living right next door.
benefiting from her husband's like torturous.
Oh my God, that's so true.
Job.
I actually did write down in my notes that this movie reminded me a lot of Zone of Interest.
So feeling that movie also has a very unique, definable way that it's shot, you know. There's
totally.
There's no close-ups in that movie. It's all
right.
Wide shots.
Maybe the sound design as well, because I remember that being a big thing of Zone of Interest. And in this, the sound design is incredible as well because it's centered around whatever the character is hearing, not necessarily what is happening in the scene.
Right. Strong piece of work here, Mr. RaMell Ross. Nickel Boys. It's available on the big screen right now. You can check it out. You can go see it, especially if you live in Los Angeles. There's a few theaters where it is playing still in Los Angeles, and I'd recommend you see it on the big screen. I, myself, did not have the pleasure of seeing it on the big screen, but I may actually go back this week and see it on the big screen while I still can, because I'm sure it's a much different experience. So check it out. And please, as always, let us know what you think of Nickel Boys. Let us know what you think of Anora. Let us know what you think of Nosferatu. Let us know what you think of our show, the Gimme Three podcast. You could do that in a few different ways. Number one, you just scroll down to our episode description and you click on a link that says, send us a text message. Click that link. I even put some bold red exclamation points next to that link now, so now you really can't miss it. You got no excuse. Send us a text message, and if it's good, if it's funny, if it's witty, or if it's bold, we may even read it right here on the air. Second way to get a hold of us is to go to our Instagram and, as the kids say, slide into our DMs. Actually, the kids probably don't say that anymore, but you
need to get a Snapchat.
Yeah.
That's how they communicate.
Snatch chat?
Yeah.
What was it? Snatch chat?
Snapchat.
Oh, Snapchat.
Snapchat.
Gotcha. Anyways, Gimme Three podcast on Instagram. GIMME spell out 3 podcast. Gimme Three podcast. You can message us on Instagram. Bella's always posting some excellent videos and pictures there covering our episodes. And we frequently do polls on our Instagram as well. Sometimes we are, trying to decide what our third film we're going to be discussing for a particular episode. We say, you know what? Let's ask the followers. Let's ask the listeners. Let's ask the people, because we are the people's podcast here. So you're going to want to follow us on Instagram. And of course, you really want to help out the show. Really, really want to help out the show. You sign up for our Patreon. $5 a month. There's a link in our episode description. You're going to get bonus episodes. Last week, we just put out an interview that I had with Sam Pollard, editor of Mo Better Blues, as well as the director of a bunch of amazing documentaries. Peabody Award winner also, actually, Sam Pollard. So yeah, Patreon, that's the way to really, really support us. And of course, just listening to and downloading our episodes really helps us out. Sonja, do you want to let the people know where they can find you on the Letterboxd?
Yes. My letterbox name is Sonja M, Sonjam. And I watch a lot of movies.
You do. That's why I married you. Bella, what about you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Portrait of a Cinephile, or on Letterboxd as well at Efstratis. It's just B and then my last name, Efstratis.
You can follow me on Letterboxd, on Instagram, or on Blue Sky, all at Nicholas Ybarra, and Ybarra is spelled with a Y. We want to thank you all for listening to the Gimme Three podcast, and we will see you at the movies.